And the only reason why women will probably know more about the sexual experience and making sex possibly better for themselves, if not for the both of y'all, is because a lot of women have been talking about how their sexual experiences, when they try to mimic the man's, tends to be very substandard, and they look into ways to make it better. So essentially, they have learned because things haven't been as great for them. And if you think that this is absolute BS that I'm talking about, how many of y'all try to find a man's...
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Welcome to the Breaktime Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who used to believe that bukkake was a Japanese form of martial arts. He is also a man who recently added running his mouth to his cardio routine. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. I have come through to talk about men and women and fucking around. Yeah. A lot of what I'm going to talk about on this episode is fucking around. Infidelity, of course, because, there is going to be the main topic on that, but fucking around. I think fucking around encapsulates just about everything on this episode, just because when I look at what I'm supposed to talk about, I feel as though there's quite a bit of fucking around here. Then when I look at, what I'm supposed to handle as a main topic, there is quite a bit of fucking around there. It's just that one's called cheating. This other one is more of, an overrated, underrated experience. But all in all, if you like what you're listening to, you can hit me up via the social media to give your feedback. If you don't like it, you can also give feedback on that as well. And or if you want to give some form of topic that you feel that we should be discussing on this episode. And the social media links are usually in the description below. And if you're not much of a social media person, there's a link that usually says give feedback here, which is right at the top of the description, which you can also use, which is perfectly okay. And I will get your feedback from there. But all in all, thank you so much for listening. I hope you listen all the way till the end. And to move on from here, I'd love to go to the main topic, which involves a study that a bunch of people might start to dispute quite a bit. But before I can get into any of that, first of all, I want to talk about Oloni. Now, for those of you all that haven't listened to this podcast long enough, Oloni is a UK-based female influencer who wrote the book The Big O and usually speaks on sex positivity from a women's perspective. And she is pretty big on IG. I'm not sure about a lot of the other platforms, but she is known for talking about the female sexual experience. Now, I have discussed her on this podcast a couple of different times. Most times, for some reason, it's like I don't entirely agree with what she says. But there was a clip where she was talking about one thing that she finds is overrated when it comes to the sexual experience today, and her thoughts on it were particularly interesting and straightforward, and it is something that I do want to get into because it does involve men, because it kind of does take two to tango, and a lot of what she did say did actually relate to men. So I'm just gonna let the clip play, then I will get into my thoughts on it. So without further ado,
what do you think boys do to girls that they think feels good but doesn't actually feel good?
Oh my God, PIV, which is penetration in vagina. So I think a lot of sex, and don't get twisted, obviously penetration in vagina is amazing, but I feel like in some cases it can be overrated to the point that we're skipping all the fun and goodness of sex, which is the foreplay, which is the kissing, the talking, maybe the talking not for everyone, of course, not too much talking, but it could be the fun, it could be the toys. Not being open to that side is where I think some guys lack, and they just focus mainly on penis and vagina. And it's just like, there's so much more to sex, and and sex is not over just because you arrive. Do you get what I'm saying?
Okay, now having said that, I think it kind of reminds me of a YouTube comment that I read probably maybe a couple of months, maybe a year ago. I can't even remember what the video was about, but I remember it involved the mating experience to some degree. And it was a guy that was busy talking about how when he was having a discussion with, I think it was his grandfather or his grandmother, they were talking about how dating nowadays is so bland, people don't know how to pleasure each other and shit. And they were talking about how they used to focus quite a bit on petting or just being intimate without having sex. And apparently during their times, it was a lot nicer. People knew how to make out. Guys knew how to make a woman feel good and feel special. Even when they were being intimate, they'd pay a little bit more attention here and there. But the moment the pill came and women could have sex without the threat of being pregnant right up their doorstep, a lot of that kind of started to fizzle off. So a lot of people started putting a lot more emphasis on the sex, And a lot of that intimacy, a lot of that knowing how to touch someone, knowing how to be intimate with someone before you stick it in them is an art now that started sort of getting lost to a lot of people. And when you're hearing women like Oloni saying stuff like this, it does kind of make sense. Like, there are a lot of guys, and I will say this admittedly, that do not know how to make love to, or should I say, how to be affectionate with a woman besides the sex, and by the sex, I mean sticking the dick in them. Now, is this an issue that affects a lot of guys? Yes. But can we entirely blame guys for not knowing this? I don't entirely think so. And it's mainly because when you look at the reference point where we learn stuff like this, because of course, in as much as yes, people will have sex and it's something that is hardwired into us, like giving pleasure is something that you kind of have to learn to do. And suffice it to say, we do not have that many good reference points on knowing how to give good pleasure to a woman that does not involve sticking your dick inside her vagina. Now, with me having said that, I'm sure there are people that have automatically thought to the point of, oh, you know, the problem is that guys usually learn how to have sex or learn how to be intimate with a woman through porn, and that's a bad thing. And much as that is true, to an extent at least, that's not the biggest part of the reason. Now, of course, I will get into why porn kind of does do guys a bit of disservice in this sector, but I feel like there's a much bigger culprit in this that does not require you to be watching it in like the privacy of like your bedroom and shit, and that is the media that we consume today. Now, if you look at a lot of series and movies and you try and look at the sex scenes that are there, if you try and you look at the intimacy scenes that are there, how many of them have foreplay or sex scenes that go beyond 2-3 minutes? Because let's be very honest, I barely know of any. Even 365 Days, that series of movies that sent women over the moon because blah blah sex scene blah blah. Like, even that one didn't have its sex scenes lasting too long. And granted, it was mostly a shit movie. Even the women that were watching it were saying that it's a shit movie. They were just there for the sex scenes, of which guys probably wouldn't do such a thing. So you expect a guy to know that foreplay is important and they should give the woman foreplay, and yet most of what they'll watch will involve an intimacy scene of like maybe 30 seconds at best, and then all of a sudden you're sticking it into her. And I'm looking at the media that is being produced within this timeline, media that has been there from like, I guess, as recent as 10 years ago. Like, that's what's there. You look at series like Power, that's what you will experience. So you expect a guy that has been watching series and movies that have foreplay for like maybe 30 seconds and fucking for like maybe another 30 seconds to maybe a minute, and you expect that they're going to prioritize foreplay when it comes to them actually having sex? Like, where do you think they'd get that knowledge from? Not unless if they're talking to women and these are women that are open about the female sexual experience with that guy. Or maybe not unless if the guy is super in love and is like, oh, you know, let's try and wait or some shit like that. So for the most part, guys don't know because we just haven't had that good of a source of knowledge to learn. And then there's porn that'll make it even worse. So the guys that'll probably be addicted to porn or guys that have learned intimacy from porn might probably not be the best, because for them, they are used to a piece of content that is quite literally made to suit the male sexual experience, whereby the time between you knowing that you're going to do it and you actually doing it is seconds to a few minutes. Like, how do you expect that to happen? And I know there's a babe who's gonna be like, oh, you know, you guys should probably look into other sources, you should talk to more women, of which talking to more women, yes, I totally agree with, but how many guys do you think will sit and be like, okay, how can I make the sex better between the both of us? Like, that shit is tied to our egos as men. And the only reason why women will probably know more about the sexual experience and making sex possibly better for themselves, if not for the both of y'all, is because a lot of women have been talking about how their sexual experiences, when they try to mimic the man's, tends to be very substandard, and they look into ways to make it better. So essentially, they have learned because things haven't been as great for them. And on top of that, women only know about and cater to the female sexual experience as opposed to the males. And if you think that this is absolute BS that I'm talking about, how many of y'all try to find a man's other erogenous zones besides his dick? barely any of you. If you decide to take the dick out of the equation and we tell the woman to pleasure the guy without his dick, there's a lot of women that would absolutely be confused on where to start from. Although, then again, I might be wrong about this shit, even though I don't think I am, but either way, I want your thoughts on it. But for now, I'm gonna leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of this episode. Now, I want to bring back a topic that I was talking about not too long ago, and that is the topic of infidelity, or as we like to call it, cheating. Now, in a previous episode, I was talking about how you could influence your partner to cheat on you or not to cheat on you based on certain things, and also the idea that cheaters get cheated on a lot more, or at least the belief that that's there. And when I was referencing it, I was referencing a podcast that was being done by Chris Williamson, who does the Modern Wisdom podcast, and one of the guests that was there, who is known as Mac and Murphy. Now, just like that past episode, I am going to reference a clip that was pulled from the Modern Wisdom podcast regarding that specific episode where Mac and Murphy and Chris Williamson were talking, and it was the whole talk of who cheats more, men or women. And the thoughts on it were particularly interesting, but it also did leave some bits on the table, and also I feel like there might be some biases to it, so I'm gonna let the clip play, then get into my thoughts on it. So without further ado,
who cheats more, men or women?
Men cheat more. Men say they cheat more when you ask them. Men say they get cheated on less when you ask them. So women report getting cheated on more. And then women who are the third person, right? So some people might say, oh, well, maybe women are just understating things. When you ask who's more successful as a mate poacher, women who mate poach tend to have a higher hit rate. There are three people involved in any given affair. There's the primary partner, there's the person who's cheating, and then there's the affair partner. And you can do studies on any one of those three groups, and you generally find the same result, which is that the man is generally more likely to have an affair. In some studies, it's not a big gap. In some cultural contexts, it's a huge gap, but that would be the overall state of the science there. And so the revenge difference, it may just be downstream of the difference in committing infidelity. They have more opportunity to have an affair.
okay, so a couple of things that were mentioned on this study. They were talking about who cheats more, and they're also talking about the idea of mate poaching, which I will attend to as well, but a little later on. And honestly, having listened to this clip, I feel like it's true, but it's also a bit biased in that study seemed to be based on people's opinion, which in reality, when you think about it, can actually be influenced by a lot of things. Now, of course, yes, all three of the partners would be identified and studied and they'd be asked these questions. But in reality, I think media and a lot of society has made it such that it seems like men are the ones who cheat more. Yet in reality, we don't really know for certain. Like, we actually do not know for certain if men cheat more or if women cheat more. Mainly because a lot of men do not see shame or do not have any shame in admitting that they have cheated on their partner. There's a lot less shame on a social level when a man says that he cheated on their partner. But when a woman says that she cheats, it's considered to be worse. Now, is it really worse? That is definitely questionable, but there is more shame that befalls the woman if she says that she cheated. So there's fewer women that will admit to cheating, there's fewer women that will admit to having cheated on the past, and because of that, because there's fewer women that will admit to doing it, it does skew the results quite a bit. And also, there's a lot of men that are cheated on by their women and they will not know it even after the relationship. And there's some people who've been cheated on by their partners for years, decades even, and they probably haven't known it. And I'll get to why that's possible in a bit. Because when you look at the idea of men cheating more, I seem to see it as more of a fallacy than true, just mainly because it is very, very biased based off of the stories that we'll hear and also the kind of idea of what is cheating more. Like, when people think about the concept of who cheats more, it's mostly based off of how many partners you'll have, or at least how many partners that you will cheat on your partner with, as opposed to how long you've cheated with that person, or a combination of both. Now, guys, at least as per studies, will mostly cheat with multiple partners. Women will mainly cheat with one, maybe two partners, on the majority scale for both genders. So when you kind of look at it, it is very easy to say men cheat more. But at the same time, you also have to question what exactly is cheating more. is cheating more how much more you will give to the affair partner, or is it how many affair partners you'll have? So there's a quantity quality issue that's there that I don't think gets addressed as much. But since most people look at more as a quantity thing, so who makes for more cheating, it's men, it's very easy to dive to the whole men thing. Plus also the media will be there, and most of the stories that you'll hear is about men cheating. Yet interestingly enough, you decide to go onto online forums, go to places like Reddit, and you start to see the number of cheating stories that are there. A lot of women actually do cheat on their men, and men don't know, which is why I believe that women could possibly be cheating more than men. It's just that most men don't pick up on it. And I've spoken about this before. Battle of the Sexes episode 96. This was done in what? End 2021, if I'm not wrong, because that was one of the episodes that I did in video. So if you are on the Break Time on Westside YouTube channel, you'll probably find it, or the Break Time podcast YouTube channel, you'll probably find it. And I was talking about how, the original story that made up that episode was the fact that there was a lady who had called Classic 105 and claimed that she has been cheating on her husband for years. The kid that she has isn't even the husband's. The husband hasn't known about it. She has a sneaky link that she always links up with, or I think it was two of them, and the guy couldn't pick up on it. And I spoke about how men focus on the highlights, women focus on the details. In that a guy can be found out because the guy did not pick up on the details, like maybe the lipstick mark or the patch of makeup that's on his shirt, or the smell of her perfume on his shirt. But a woman can very easily pick up on that shit, eliminate it, and provided that she does not mess with how the flow of everything goes between the two of them, the guy will not pick up on shit. Then I also spoke about the fact that men also aren't in the position to actually look for some of these things a lot more, because it's not like you'll find a guy openly going to check the partner's phone, not unless if the guy is insecure, which is considered a bad thing. But for a woman, if she decides to check the guy's phone, yes, she could be insecure, but it's because the guy hasn't reinforced her trust or doesn't reassure her or some shit. So it's completely justified. So at the end of it, for the most part, the guy does not pay that much attention, and even though he could, he probably won't bother because he doesn't want to look like he's an insecure cuck. But the babe can probably go and check, and she'll find out more instances of cheating, and she won't really be found out if she does choose to cheat. So in that case, it does mean that women can actually cheat more, or women can actually cheat a little bit more efficiently or without being found out than the men can. So by default, it's just not really working in our favor as guys. But then now the issue of mate poaching came up, and people were talking about how women mate poach a lot more. Now, mate poaching essentially is you stealing someone else's mate, so essentially what we refer to as being a homewrecker. And women are listed as the highest culprits, or at least the most culprits in cases like this. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's to a landslide compared to men. And the reason why I can say this with quite a bit of certainty, even though I don't have any stats on it, is because a lot of times you do not find a guy that is the affair partner trying to convert the cheating partner into like an actual monogamous full-time partner. You rarely ever see that happen. All right, which kind of reinforces and makes the whole facade of your partner not cheating a lot better, because as a guy, it's not like you're going to walk up to another dude and be like, yo, I'm banging your babe and I wanted us to get to know each other. You're not doing that shit. It's not like you're going to see another dude busy banging someone's wife or banging someone's girlfriend and wants to go and approach them as a man. Like, we don't do that shit. Even though you find that out, it's either you eject yourself from the situation or you enjoy the pussy and you shut the fuck up. Which also does contribute to the fact that guys end up being found out, because a lot of these women will now start to want to insert themselves into the guy's main parts of their life. So by design, they make it easier for themselves to be found out, such as having as much perfume as possible, such that when they're busy holding the guy, their perfume remains on the guy's shirt. Or they start calling at weird hours of the night, or just at weird times in general, to the point where they can even be doing it frequently, such that it's almost like they're trying to get the other babe to notice. Or they'll have their makeup on you and claim that it's a silly mistake, even though they probably applied quite a bit of makeup to apply on your shirt so that you could end up being found out. or they found that they applied the makeup, but it's not like they're trying to wipe it off or they're trying to take it off. Nah, they leave it as is. So at the end of it, you find that the babe becomes easy to find out by the wife or by the girlfriend, because the guy, you could say he is sloppy on one end, but also it's because this woman is making sure that she is getting herself found. She is making sure that she is having interactions with this guy to a point where it is almost visible by the other woman, and that becomes a problem. So you find that in a lot of cases, they will do that quite a bit. The wife gets to find out, or the girlfriend gets to find out, and now the job becomes playing possession so that they can eject the wife or girlfriend and place themselves in that spot. Because now when they're there, it's not going to be an issue when they're in public. It's not going to be an issue when they end up being introduced to other people. They don't have to stay in the shadows the entire time, and they can get a lot of that very public affection without really wishing for it and not being able to get it because they are a side piece. So it does become particularly easy to see why it is that women would be the biggest culprits when it comes to mate poaching. Because at the end of the day, just as a lot of people like to say, when a guy sees a babe who is taken that he likes, he will want to get a babe that has similar characteristics to that woman. But when a woman sees a guy who is taken that she likes, she will not just want to get the guy who has the same characteristics as this guy. She will want to get that guy himself. And when you kind of think about it, the best place you can find the person with the characteristics that you'd want that is also taken is the person themselves. So just go to patient zero and scoop it up from there. Don't go try and find a variant from elsewhere. No, go to patient zero straight ahead. So because of those difference in approach, you can very easily see why it is that it looks like men would cheat more, and it would also look like women will mate poach a hell of a lot more. And to kind of conclude all of this, let's be particularly honest. Whether you want to say that men cheat more or women cheat more, or men cheat better or women cheat better, at the end of the day, every gender cheats. Every gender has a bunch of people that are cheating out here, but who does it more or better deviates from the fact that the problem is cheating. The problem is cheating and how rampant it has been. The problem is cheating and how easy it seems for a lot of people to do nowadays, and how publicized it's becoming, and how normalized a bunch of people are trying to make it. And if anything, we should probably be trying to find more ways to curb it and more ways to make it seem like a bad idea and avoid it, as opposed to having a live debate on who cheats more, men or women. And as someone that is very against the idea of it, I also have been preaching it on this podcast since day one that I do not endorse cheating. While I do try to understand it, I do not endorse it. Although then again, I might be wrong about some of these stats in my understanding of it, just the same way I could be wrong about this entire episode, but either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the Breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breaktime Podcast. And on X, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.